Welcome, students. This is Unit 2 of New Social Movements. Module name is LGBT Movement. Myself, Sanskriti Iyer, Assistant Professor, Government College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Quebec. So, in this unit, the outline is about introduction to LGBT movement as a new social movement and to understand the development of LGBT movement. So, learning outcomes, the student will be able to understand the LGBT movement as a new social movement and also to describe the LGBT movement. So, students, when we are talking about LGBT, so it is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender movement. It is a movement of these particular communities and it is a part of the new social movement that advocate the LGBT for LGBT people in the society. So now when we are talking about LGBT community students, which now we have LGBTQ. So and also E. So here when we are talking about this particular community, we know the kind of discrimination that has been followed in the world over the period of time, the taboo that has been attached to this community, the kind of conception that the society is having, and what has happened over the years. The new social movement, it speaks about the identity politics. So basically here it is a fight for the identity, it is fight for the equal rights given to the different discriminated groups. So we have different caste groups, we have different racial groups, we have different you know issues related to the women, senior citizen, children. So when we are talking about these rights, this particular community, that is the LGBT, we are talking about LGBT only over here because the movement we are talking is which has started since 1960s. So basically, it is speaking about their rights. So what has happened is when there was the different movements that were going on, maybe related to women's rights or the universal suffrage or the women's economic rights, the political rights. That time the LGBT community, they gained inspiration and they started off with their own movement. The focus is on social liberation and same-sex marriage. So earlier movements focused on self-help, self-acceptance, such as the homophile movement of the 1950s. So there are numerous LGBT rights organizations that are active worldwide fighting for the LGBT rights. So let us talk about the development of LGBT movements. A commonly stated goal of LGBT among these movements is a social equality for the LGBT people, because the social acceptance of this LGBT community is supposed to be a big question mark, because whenever in a family, when we have a gay child or the lesbian child or the transgender being born, it is usually discarded or discriminated, whereby they have been left as orphans. So there is a fight for their rights. The focus is on building LGBT communities. And why LGBT communities? So that they can unanimously fight for their equal human rights. So they are working towards liberation for the broader society from biphobia, homophobia, and transphobia. So these are the phobias that are being related to, whether it is to a gay, to a lesbian, or to a transgender, considering them as, there is some problem into their psyche, there is some problem in their orientation, or considering, being a gay is some mental issue. So this kind of phobias that are there, or, accepting them, treating them as normal, which is not happening because there is no education, there is no literacy that is being spread, which should be spread. So they are fighting towards it, they are working towards it, and with the help of the globalization and the rise of social media activism, uh, at a larger level they have been succeeded too. The LGBT movements organized today are made up of a wide range of political activism and cultural activity, including lobbying. So they do lobbying. Now, what is lobbying? Like, in order to get the political rights set, so they would be, pressurizing the government for passing of different legislations. Like in India, the way the entire community was fighting for their rights, the street marches, social groups, media, art, and research. So, there are street marches, which we also call as a pride parade, which happens in June, the week long parade that goes on. There are social groups also. There is, through media, there is awareness, there is art, through portrayal of art and through research. There is so much of work that has been going on through LGBT community for their rights. So when we are talking further about the LGBT community, the new social movements of 60s inspired many LGBT activities to become activists to become more radical. So as I gave the example of the women's movement, the gay liberation movement was the result of such kind of inspiration. The radical stance is attributed to the Stonewall riots of 1969. So let me tell you, students, about the Stonewall riots of 1969. What has happened? This is at the bar in Stonewall, whereby there were this. Uh, dagger queens and gay lesbians all were there in the bar, and then since it was prohibited, and the police took action against them, whereby the first time they fought back, and they they also raised their voice, and these riots at Stonewall, okay, whereby it was followed by the foundation of Gay Liberation Front, GLF, and the Gay Activist Alliance, that is GAA. So, Gay Liberation Front, it introduced the Gay Manifesto. So now, what is the Gay Manifesto? Usually we have the manifestos, whereby the different rights are mentioned, different policies are framed. So in the same manner, they also introduced Gay Manifesto. Now, what was included in that? The equal rights, the equal economic rights, and the education rights, and so on. The Politics of Being Queer by Paul Godman gave an intellectual support to the movement. So when we are talking further, in 1970s, the drag queen of GLF, they started providing support. Now, who is a drag queen? Drag queen is nothing, is nobody but a man who exaggerates or who shows off his liking to be dressed as women, to be appearance as a woman, or the behavior as a woman. So they started providing support for gay prisoners, housing for the homeless gay who were abandoned, who were discarded by their family, and the street people. So the bisexual activist, it is Brenda Howard, is known as the mother of pride. Why? Because she is the one who originated the idea for a week-long series of events around the Pride Day. So usually Pride Day is celebrated in June. So Howard, along with the other bisexual activists like Robert A. Martin, okay, who is also called as the Donny the Punk, and the gay activist L. Craig Schoonmaker, are credited with the popularizing the word pride to describe their festivities. So when we are talking further about LGBT movement, it started off in US, and now let us see how it spread worldwide. So in United Kingdom, the Gay Liberation Front had its first meeting in the basement of London School of Economics on October 13, 1970s. By 1971, the UK Gay Liberation Front was recognized as a political movement in the national press, holding weekly meetings of 200 to 300 people. So now it was slowly, the people were recognizing this. In 1971, the gay liberation movement in Germany and Switzerland started with Rosa von Proham's movie. That is, it is not the homosexual who is perverse, but the society in which he lives. So basically, they wanted to change the whole, the kind of taboo that is there in the minds of the people about their orientation towards the homosexuals. So in May 1974, the American Psychiatric Association, the result of all such radical activism is that the Psychiatric Association took gay people out of the category of being automatically considered mentally ill, and simply because of their sexual orientation, so which was considered as a psychic issue. It was since 1974, it was not considered as a psychic issue. By 1974, eternal disagreements had led to the movement splintering. So what happened was, there was within the gay liberation front, what had happened was, there was lesbians who were feeling that their views, their points are not being represented. So there was splintering of this movement. In 1972, what has happened was Sweden becomes the first country in the world to allow people who are transsexual. Now this is different, huh? Bisexual, transsexual, by legislation to surgically change their sex and provide free hormone replacement therapy. So Sweden is the first country to do that. And on June 24th, 1994, the first Gay Pride March was celebrated in Asia in Philippines. So India, it has come much later, like in after 2000, in this millennial decades, whereby Pride Parade has been started. So let us see what are the change laws after the LGBT movement and which are still in the process of change. So it is the Netherlands which becomes the first country to allow same-sex marriage in 2001. And it was followed by with Belgium in 2003 and Spain and Canada in 2005. And after that, we have a number of 25 to 30 countries who have allowed the same-sex marriage. In 2003, in the case that is the Lawrence versus Texas, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down the sodomy laws, and now the sodomy law is the one which considers same sex marriage or the sexual relationship between the same sex people as a crime. So that particular law was erased and making consensual homosexual sex legal in all 50 states. So on September 6, 2018, now let us come to India. In 2018, consensual gay sex, okay, was legalized in India by the Supreme Court. So now when it comes to the consensual, the question is about the lesbians also, and that's why there is a splintering of this movement. So let us come to the conclusion of this LGBT movements. Okay, they are opposed by a variety of individuals and organizations till date, and there are several reasons. There are certain personal reasons also, there are political reasons also, and there are religious prejudices whereby they give the religious orientation, saying that our religion doesn't accept this, whether it is the Protestants and all, to the gay rights, homosexual relations, or the gay people. So when it comes to India, we have mythological references whereby we have Bruhannala, then we have Mohini avatar of Bhagwan Vishnu in the Indian mythology, or then if we come to the segregation of different the Manushya, Rakshas, Dev, or Gandharva. So even this Hijra community or the Tritiya Panthi, they also come into the picture. So there are references, but over the period of time, the taboo that has been attached to the people have segregated them. And there are, as a society in some countries, mostly in the Western Europe, Northern America, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, Taiwan, it has become more accepting of homosexuality. That is also because of the more openness and the broad mindedness when it comes to the education. It had been suggested that education has a positive impact on support for same sex marriage, not only the same sex marriage, but also to accepting this community at the larger perspective. Here are the references. Thank you.